Hey everyone! ChatGPT Taylor aka Taylor here. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we will be continuing the What If series, where I go over some hypothetical scenarios from Disventure Camp that could have taken place if one critical event was changed. Last time, we took a look at what would have happened if Rhea didn't steal Rosa Maria's totem in episode 10 of season 2. Today's video will look at something different. If there are any specific what if scenarios that you would like to see me play out in the future, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And with that, let's get started. Before I begin, make sure to like and subscribe if this video is to your liking, and make sure to comment down below if there's anything that you would like to see going forward. Alright, the topic for this episode is definitely not a novel topic, but a commenter suggested this topic in a previous video, so I decided to take a crack at it. I would also like to shout out two other Disventure Camp YouTubers who also made videos on this topic. These YouTubers are Alexa and TD Junkie. If you end up liking this video, I highly encourage you to check out their videos as well. The topic for this video is: what if Aiden was poisoned in episode 5 of season 2? As a bit of refresher, let's look back at that episode. In episode 5, the orange team consisted of two factions: the alliance of Yul and James, and the alliance of Aiden and Lake. Knowing that they might end up in a tiebreaker, Yul created a plan where he would distract Aiden, allowing James to poison his food with some wild mushrooms, with the intention of getting Aiden medically evacuated. However, due to James's admiration for Aiden, James instead poisoned Yul's food, causing Yul to be medically evacuated instead. We know what happened next. James and Aiden set aside their differences, aligned with Rosa Maria, Rhea, and Lake to take down the Poly Trio, fought off a retaliatory attack from Carol, and James went on to win the season. But what happens if Aiden ends up getting poisoned instead? Let's find out. The only thing that I want to go over for this episode is how Aiden ends up getting poisoned. The easy thing would be for James to just poison Aiden instead of Yul. But I don't think that's a realistic option. James himself said that unless it's Yul, poisoning someone else is too much. And if you combine this with James's existing love for Aiden, I just can't justify having James intentionally poisoning Aiden or wanting to poison Aiden. And I can't just have James distract Aiden while Yul poisons Aiden's food, because then James is still operating under the expectation that Aiden will end up poisoned, which we can't let happen. Therefore, we have to find a way for Aiden to be poisoned while maintaining James's desire to not have anyone end up being poisoned. In this timeline, I'm still going to have James spread the mushroom on Aiden's food. However, once he and Yul are done celebrating, James would chase after Aiden and Lake to warn Aiden to not to eat his food. But despite James's pleas, Aiden wouldn't listen to him. Considering that James had a hand in manipulating Aiden on two separate occasions, there's very little reason for Aiden to want to listen to anything that James has to say. Aiden might even eat his food right in front of James in an act of defiance. And because of this, Aiden ends up vomiting and getting medically evacuated, leaving James extremely disappointed with himself. Sorry Aiden, but considering the topic of this video, this had to be your destiny. Let's start by getting into the challenge, which as we know, merges the teams and splits the campers up into pairs. Since Aiden is gone, and because James and Yul are still allies by this point, I think the only change that needs to happen from the canon timeline is for Yul to take Aiden's place as James's partner for the challenge. Rosa and Rhea are paired up together, Hunter and Lake are paired up together, and Ali and Tess are paired up together. The events of the episode should largely remain the same. Rosa assures Rhea that they will remain allies, Ali and Tess become closer as a duo, Lake is nearly removed from the game and starts the beginning of her independence arc, and Hunter spends the night scrambling to survive. But what about James and Yul? Now, I'm not going to have them cuddle like Aiden and James did in canon. That wouldn't make sense. But I'm actually going to do something plot-worthy. Before they head into the forest, James would look online and realize that he's being cancelled for his role in poisoning Aiden, causing him to lose followers. This would cause James to reflect on his actions and the way that he's behaved so far in the competition. During the challenge, Yul would probably scold James for feeling bad about poisoning Aiden, which I think would be the tipping point for James. This makes him realize what's really important in his life, and that he made a mistake by working with Yul and betraying Aiden. This could prompt him to try and play the game more honorably going forward. We know that James is capable of changing. In canon, this epiphany happened in episode 11, which might have been a little late based on the opinions that I've seen in the community. So, I don't see an issue with James beginning his redemption arc earlier than in canon. And with that, the episode ends the same way as in canon. Lake remains in the competition, and no one is eliminated. Before getting into the challenge, I want to talk about some of the pre-challenge interactions between the campers. In canon, the main interactions were between Rosa, Lake, and Rhea as Rhea retrieved her perfume from Crystal and Lake obtained a new wig. I expect this to stay the same. However, for this timeline, I have James following and joining them soon after, wanting to talk to them. Motivated by a desire to change his ways, James would come clean about Aiden being poisoned, saying that it was Yule's plan and that even though he put the mushroom on Aiden's plate, James did try to stop Aiden from eating his food. Lake would support James's claims, since she left the mess hall with Aiden and likely would have seen James try and stop Aiden in this timeline. Rhea and Rosa Maria might be a bit wary of James's actions, but I think they would agree to work with him, considering their mutual hatred of Yule. Meanwhile, Yule returns to his alliance with Hunter, Tess, and Ali. The Poly trio would ask Yule about how he survived, and he tells them that he poisoned Aiden. I considered having Yule blame James for this action in order to keep a target off of his back, but I feel like that would be out of character for Yule. We know that Yule isn't very smart, considering his misstep in episode 6 of Disventure Camp All-Stars when he said kiss her instead of kissing Gret. And we know that Yule can't keep his mouth shut. Therefore, I think it's in character for Yule to brag about poisoning Aiden. But how would his alliance react? I think Hunter would be shocked that Yule did something so horrible, but I think he would accept it and move on. Hunter admitted in the canon episode 6 that despite Yule's horrible qualities and actions, he was willing to keep Yule around as a shield for him, Ali, and Tess. So, it would make sense for him to do the same here. Yes, the morality of aligning with someone who just poisoned another camper is highly questionable. However, Hunter is also the guy who criticized Fiore for 4 straight episodes due to her lack of physical ability, so him wanting to keep Yule in the game despite his actions isn't too far-fetched. But for Ali and Tess, I feel like they would be more concerned about Yule's behavior. We know from Disventure Camp All-Stars that Ali values her emotions and morals when making decisions, so I feel like her emotions and morals would make her question whether or not it's worth working with Yule any longer. And considering how close Ali and Tess are by this point, I would expect Tess to have similar feelings. Maybe they try and bring this up to Hunter, but due to Hunter's strategy-first mindset, he insists that they have to stick with Yule, potentially upsetting Ali and Tess. Now let's get to the challenge. Since Aiden is gone, let's just have Yule take his place on Team 2. Part 1 of the challenge is basically dodgeball. Now in canon, Team 1 managed to get Team 2 down to 1 member before Crystal called off this part of the challenge. Therefore, in order for Team 2 to win, Yule would need to knock out every member of Team 1. This would require some significant skill on Yule's part, and there isn't any evidence to suggest that he would be good at throwing dodgeballs and knocking people off of platforms. So, I still think that Team 1 wins Part 1 of the challenge, which means that the final outcome of the challenge shouldn't change. Team 1 ends up competing in Part 2 of the challenge, James and Rhea end up getting eliminated here, Hunter and Lake face off in the final part, and Hunter goes on to win individual immunity, just like in canon. But who goes home? I think Rhea, Rosa, and Lake vote for Yule, considering their existing hatred for him. I think James would join them too, wanting this to be the start of his new life in the game. However, I do think that James would tell Yule that he's voting with him in order to keep up appearances. As for the other alliance, I think they would be split on who to vote for. I think Ali and Tess would want to vote for Lake, since she's not working with them and she almost beat Hunter in the last challenge. However, I think Yule would want to vote for Rhea since she sent him to the orange team and voted for him at the episode 3 elimination ceremony. I suspect that Hunter would want to vote for Rhea too in order to keep Yule happy so he'll still work with him, Ali, and Tess. But to be honest, I don't think it matters who this alliance ends up voting for. If Hunter sides with Ali and Tess by voting for Lake, thereby forcing Yule to join them out of self-preservation, then it's a 4-4 tie between Lake and Yule, and I'm inclined to think that Lake beats Yule in a tiebreaker considering her performance in the last challenge. If Yule and Hunter put their foot down by voting for Rhea, then I actually think that Ali and Tess vote for Yule. They're already a bit upset by Hunter's insistence on supporting someone as cruel as Yule, and Yule and Hunter putting their foot down would probably rub Ali and Tess the wrong way. And I know that voting for Yule causes them to lose an ally, but we already know that Ali is willing to make non-optimal moves in order to maintain her freedom of choice, as evidenced by her insistence on pulling Hunter on his sled in episode 9. So, it's reasonable to believe that Ali could do something similar here, and Tess would probably follow her, causing a 6-2 vote that sends Yule home. And if something crazy happens and the alliance splits their votes 2-2, then the final vote is 4-2 that sends Yule home. So no matter how you slice it, Yule gets voted out. For the purposes of establishing something official, let's say that Yule and Hunter put their foot down and vote for Rhea, causing Ali and Tess to flip and send Yule home by a vote of 6-2. I usually give my apologies to the eliminated camper, but I think Yule had this one coming, so I won't. And one more thing, even though James is aware of who the other alliance is voting for and would probably tell Rosa, Rhea, and Lake, I'm not convinced that Rosa would play her immunity totem. This is partially because she would feel confident that there are enough people voting for Yule, and partially because of her semi-distrust of James, considering that he did technically poison Aiden. Also, Rosa didn't reveal her totem until episode 8 in canon, so I would rather keep that canonical event the same. And with that, let's move on to episode 8. Once again, I'll go over some pre-challenge interactions. First of all, Rosa will still reveal her totem to Lake and Rhea in this timeline, and Rhea will start to feel insecure about her position in the alliance, just like in canon. But with the Poly Trio, I think Hunter would confront Ali and Tess about Yule's elimination. In turn, Ali and Tess would inform Hunter about their feelings towards him and Yule, admitting that they felt like they didn't have much of a say in their alliance, and that they felt that Hunter cared more about Yule than about them. As a result, I think Ali and Tess would want some time away from Hunter for now, leaving Hunter regretful over how he treated Ali and Tess. Now let's get to the challenge. I think Rhea, Rosa, and Lake still stick together. However, since Ali and Tess want to distance themselves from Hunter, I think Hunter takes Aiden's place and sticks with James. Ali goes off to shower, and Tess probably goes back to the cabins. James and Hunter probably go to the mess hall to make popcorn, just like in canon. With some time to themselves, I think Hunter talks to James about his issues with Ali and Tess, and asks for advice about what to do. I think James would tell Hunter to think over what he did, and figure out what truly matters to him, just like what James did for himself. Hunter would agree, and he would leave to apologize to Tess and Ali. This leaves James alone, allowing the killer to kill him like in canon. I would expect the rest of the challenge to resolve in a manner similar to the canon timeline. The killer takes out Ali in the shower. Hunter tries to avenge Ali by going to the production tent, only to be taken out by Nina. Rhea is taken out after helping the other three escape the cabins. The remaining three campers try to escape using the bus. Tess is taken out after the killer secretly enters the bus. Rosa is taken out after staying back to confront the killer, and Lake is taken out after trying to escape in a boat. Of course, this means that Carol, who was the serial killer for the episode, wins immunity and returns to the competition. But remember, Carol still gets to give immunity to two other campers. In canon, Carol gave immunity to Ali and Hunter since Nina wanted them to be safe due to them being in the minority. But in this situation, there are two trios that are opposing each other, so there isn't really a way for one whole alliance to gain immunity. And I also don't feel like Carol has any solid attachments to anyone left in the game, so I think I have to go with my best judgment. And my gut is telling me that Nina would tell Carol to give immunity to Ali and Tess. We know that Nina wants to add chaos into the game, and since Rosa has the immunity totem, and since Nina probably knows this since she's a staff member, her alliance already has an advantage, so it would make more sense to give immunity to two members of the other alliance to even out the playing field. And since Hunter tried to save Marcus during the challenge, Nina probably likes Hunter less than Ali and Tess, so that leaves Ali and Tess as the ideal options for Nina. But who gets voted out? Since Hunter is the only member of his alliance who isn't immune, I would expect Rosa Maria, Rhea, and Lake to target him. Meanwhile, I think Hunter would apologize to Tess and Ali for his mistakes, vowing to include them in the decision-making process going forward, and letting them choose who to vote out next. While this wouldn't fix everything, I think it would fix their relationship enough for Ali and Tess to not target him, since Hunter is at least willing to work with them. In turn, Ali and Tess would tell Hunter to vote for Lake, which is what Ali and Tess wanted in the last episode. Together, the three of them voting for Lake maintains the canon reasoning that Lake is a physical threat for her recent challenge performances. As for Carol, I think she would join the Poly Trio in voting for Lake, since Lake voted her out back in episode 2. And for James, even though he and Hunter had a heartfelt conversation earlier in the episode, I think James would stick to his morals and stay with his current allies, thereby voting for Hunter and causing a 4-4 tie. This means that Hunter and Lake end up in a tiebreaker, and since this season's version of Hunter is a challenge beast, I think he beats Lake, resulting in Lake's elimination. However, it's worth considering whether or not Rosa would save Lake with her immunity totem. Now, we know that Rosa likes Lake enough to play it on her, but I'm not sure if Rosa would be aware that Lake is in enough danger to warrant playing the immunity totem. If Ali told Rhea about targeting Lake like she did in canon, Rhea wouldn't tell Rosa, since she didn't tell her in canon. And if Hunter told James to target Lake, he wouldn't tell Rosa, since that might end up causing more drama and distrust around him, which he doesn't want at this point. Therefore, I don't see Rosa playing her totem for Lake, resulting in Lake's elimination. Sorry Lake. I guess you're destined to get 8th place. Before moving forward, I want to highlight two things from the canon episode 9 that occur in this timeline's episode 9. Firstly, Carol and Rhea still have their conversation where Carol feigns weakness and blames her elimination on James and Aiden. And secondly, James still records this conversation. But instead of recording it for Aiden, he has plans to use it for something else. Now let's jump into the challenge. For part 1 of the challenge, I still think that Rosa wins it. The only difference in the cast between this timeline and canon timeline is that Aiden is replaced by Tess, and I don't think that Tess at this point in her development would showcase the needed creativity to beat Rosa. Therefore, Rosa wins this part of the challenge and gets to do the second part of the challenge on her own. I think Carol and Rhea team up together, just like in canon. And I also think that Ali and Tess band together, due to their closeness through the last few episodes. This leaves James and Hunter to pair up once again, setting the stage for some new interactions. Now for part 2 of the challenge. I think Rosa still ends up winning this part of the challenge since she doesn't have to pull anyone, so let's skip over that. As for Rhea and Carol, I think Carol still fosters Rhea's sense of insecurity and persuades her that winning is what matters most, and Rhea falls for it. As for Ali and Tess, I think the two of them would have another discussion about Hunter and what to do about him. Maybe the scene earlier in the episode where Hunter offers help to Ali is replaced with a scene where Hunter tells Ali that he's willing to help, before panicking and assuring her that he's not trying to tell her what to do and is just being nice. Both Tess and Ali would agree that they just want things to go back to normal, agreeing that they need to talk to Hunter about it. As for James and Hunter, James might apologize for voting for Hunter, saying that he felt caught in between two people he wanted in the game, and that he's glad that Hunter is still here. Considering Hunter's current positioning in the game, I think Hunter would forgive James, knowing that James might still work with him. And in an effort to win back Hunter's loyalty, James shares his recording of Carol plotting to target him, hoping that this will show how Carol's seemingly changed demeanor is only a cover for her plot for revenge. Hunter agrees, knowing that Carol may not work with him, Ali, and Tess forever. Going into part 3 of the challenge, I would expect Rosa to pick Rhea as her partner, since that's what she did in canon. This leaves Ali and Tess together, while James and Hunter stay together. This results in Carol pairing up with Oliver, just like in canon. But who ends up winning? I actually think it's Carol. Since Aiden isn't here in this timeline, the whole plot with the spider doesn't end up happening, so Carol won't crash and get medically evacuated. As for everyone else, I think Rhea and Rosa's sled end up breaking, causing them to crash just like in canon. As for James and Hunter, assuming that James is the one being blindfolded in order to show Hunter that he trusts him, I don't think they would move fast enough to catch Carol, since Carol canonically moved faster than James in this challenge. And Carol might even ram Hunter and James if Hunter tries to hit Carol off her sled, causing them to crash. As for Ali and Tess, assuming that Tess is blindfolded and trusts Ali enough due to their deep connection through the last few episodes, Ali probably gets knocked off like in canon, causing Tess to crash. Therefore, Carol wins immunity. But who gets voted out? I think Carol targets James, fueled by her desire for revenge. Rhea probably joins her due to their recent closeness. As for Rosa, I don't think she would feel safe at all, so I think she would probably stick with Rhea and vote for James, even though she personally doesn't feel that safe. Meanwhile, since James knows that he can't work with Carol anymore, his only real chance at staying in the game is to work with Hunter, Ali, and Tess by targeting either Rosa Maria or Rhea. Even if Hunter tries to let Ali and Tess choose who gets voted out, Tess and Ali would tell Hunter that they just want things to go back to normal, and that they don't want him to be a doormat to them. After some assurance, the three of them and James would agree to vote for the same person. I think they target Rosa Maria since the poly trio started out on the same team as Rhea, so there's probably some lingering loyalty there. And I don't think James would be against this, because as long as it keeps him safe, he would probably be okay with it. This makes the vote 4-3 against Rosa Maria. However, Rosa Maria still has her immunity totem. And since she just lost her closest ally and is voting against someone who is adjacent to her alliance, it's reasonable for her to think that she may not have the votes to survive. Therefore, I think Rosa Maria steps up and plays her immunity totem to save herself, cancelling out the 4 votes cast against her and sending out James instead. Sorry James. It looks like good morals can't beat an immunity totem this time. And of course, just like I outlined in my previous videos, this episode will have a double elimination to compensate for the fact that no one was medically evacuated in this episode. Carol retains her immunity from the challenge, leaving 5 campers eligible for elimination. I think the remaining campers are divided into 2 groups, which are the poly trio and the others. At this point, considering Carol and Hunter's strategic mindsets, I think it's reasonable for both trios to assume that there will be a tie, which would cause a tiebreaker challenge. Therefore, both trios would cast their votes with this expectation in mind. For Carol, Rhea, and Rosa, I think they would target Tess. Hunter is a known physical threat, so I don't think they would want to risk facing him in a tiebreaker. And between Tess and Ali, I think the outsider trio might see Tess as the weaker competitor. And in canon, Rhea and Rosa Maria did target Tess before Ali, so I don't think it's unreasonable to expect them to target Tess first. As for the poly trio, I could see them voting in either Rosa Maria or Rhea. They could vote Rosa Maria because they literally just voted for her at the previous ceremony, or they could vote for Rhea under the belief that she's a weaker competitor, based on the fact that Rosa Maria was able to carry a sled up a hill on her own, while Rhea was being pulled by Carol. That being said, I genuinely don't think it matters who they vote for, because I think Tess loses to both of them in a tiebreaker. If the poly trio votes for Rosa, I think Rosa's strength gives her the advantage over Tess, causing Tess to lose. And if the poly trio votes for Rhea, I think there's more evidence to suggest that Rhea is more physically capable of winning a challenge, which would also cause Tess's demise. Additionally, a tiebreaker is a very high-pressure situation, and considering Tessa's current mental state, I think it's possible that Tess might crumble under the pressure of the tiebreaker, causing her elimination. But to put something concrete, let's say that the Poly Trio maintains their semi-loyalty to Rhea by voting for Rosa. Rosa beats Tess in the tiebreaker, and Tess is eliminated. It's a sad departure, but at least she made it 2 episodes further than in canon. Well done, Tess. Let's start with some pre-challenge events. Hunter and Ali start strategizing together, knowing that they are in the minority against the other 3 campers. They agree that they need to figure out who in the majority is most willing to side with them. They probably lean towards either Carol or Rhea, believing that Rosa might not want to vote with them since they voted for her at the last ceremony. Meanwhile, I think Carol will continue to work on ensuring that she has Rhea's loyalty, and Rosa would try to do the same. This would put Rhea in an awkward position, not knowing who she should be more loyal to. Rosa Maria would probably be willing to stick with Rhea and Carol, knowing that they didn't vote for her at the last ceremony. However, I think Carol would start considering the benefits of voting out Rosa Maria right now to ensure that Rhea's only option is to work with her. Now for the challenge. I would expect the 2 factions to target each other. If we take into account the canon challenge, Hunter was really good, Rosa Maria was really gun-shy, and we're not certain about how many balloons Rhea shot. It could have been 1 balloon, or it could have been none. As for the other 2 campers, we know that Carol is able to use a Gatling gun that shoots golf balls, and while we don't have any concrete evidence that Ali can shoot a gun, it's possible that she may have experience with first-person shooter video games, which could help her. Taking in the totality of the situation, I just feel like with Hunter's proven skill in this challenge as well as Ali's potential shooting abilities, I think they would manage to take out Carol, Rhea, and Rosa Maria, despite not having the numerical advantage. However, due to the evidence of Carol's decent shooting ability and the possibility that Rhea could take out 1 balloon, I think Ali and Hunter probably lose at least 1 balloon each. Maybe Hunter loses an extra 1 if Carol exclusively targets him. Either way, this leaves Hunter and Ali as the last 2. But there can only be 1 winner. And my gut feeling is that Ali wins immunity. The reason why I think this happens is because Hunter might feel a bit hesitant to shoot Ali's balloons due to the risk of her getting upset at him because of it. And considering that Hunter already upset Ali back in episode 7 of this timeline, I don't think he would want to risk that happening again. Therefore, Ali would probably have to decide whether to win it herself or to let Hunter win, and I just have a hard time believing that Ali would sacrifice herself for Hunter at this point in their relationship, so I think Ali would eventually shoot Hunter's remaining balloons, winning immunity for herself. But who gets voted out? Since I can't imagine that Rhea would want to vote out either Carol or Rosa, I think Rhea votes for Hunter. Rosa probably joins her, considering that Hunter voted for her at the last 2 elimination ceremonies. Meanwhile, Hunter and Ali probably vote for Rosa Maria again, considering that they voted for her at the last 2 elimination ceremonies, and because Rosa now has a physical threat to her name due to her winning the tiebreaker against Tess in this timeline. This leaves Carol as the swing vote. I could see her going in either direction, but I think that Carol ultimately decides to stick with Rhea and Rosa and vote out Hunter. The reason why I think this would happen is because I think Carol realizes that if she votes out Rosa now, Rhea might turn against her, and because Hunter could easily win the next immunity challenge, him and Ali could easily get Rhea to vote her out if she upsets her at this elimination ceremony. Therefore, I think it makes sense for Carol to take out Hunter, hoping that Ali will still be willing to work with her tomorrow. This makes the vote 3-2, sending Hunter out, but not before he can encourage Ali to win the game. And one more thing before I move on, even though this happened in canon, I don't see Rhea stealing everyone's stuff and framing someone for it. In canon, the catalyst that motivated Rhea to play dirtier was Aiden sabotaging Carol and Oliver with a spider. But since Aiden is long gone and the spider is nowhere to be seen, this event doesn't happen. Therefore, there's no catalyst for Rhea to make this move, and the move doesn't happen. And with that, let's continue. To start the episode, Ali would probably try and reach out to Rhea and Carol, hoping that she could flip them to her side. After all, her and Rhea started out on the same team and Carol did give immunity to her back in episode 8 in this timeline. I think Rhea would tell Ali that she felt alone on their original team because of the closeness of the Poly Trio, and that she wishes they talk more. It would be similar to the conversation that Hunter and Rhea had in episode 11, except with a lot less anger. As for Carol, I think she would tell Ali that she's willing to work with her, hoping to establish some form of connection so she would help her take out Rosa later on. Now for the challenge, but here's the thing. When I was originally writing out this section of the video, I realized that it's pretty much the same situation as the final 4 in my What If Maggie Won Rock Paper Scissors video. So if you want to see a full-length explanation for what happens in this challenge, then please go to that video to check it out. But for this video, I'm going to give a quick summary. Part 1 of the challenge is running and then jumping off a cliff. I used the arrival order from the episode 1 challenge as a reference, so the order in which they arrive at the cliffs is Ali, Rosa, Rhea, and Carol. Ali's fear of heights, which was shown in episode 5 of DC All-Stars, causes her to hesitate. Rosa stops to console her. Rhea runs past them and jumps off cliff 4. Ali eventually jumps off cliff 3. Rosa jumps off cliff 2, leaving Carol with the lowest cliff. Part 2 of the challenge is shooting. Rhea doesn't win because she has the same ammo that she had in canon, and she didn't win in canon, so she shouldn't win here. Rosa doesn't win because we don't have evidence that she has any experience with a weapon that shoots. And even though Ali won the episode 10 challenge in this timeline, which involved shooting, she also had Hunter by her side in that challenge, so there's a decent chance that Hunter's enhanced shooting skills contributed greatly to Ali's victory. We also don't know for sure if her accuracy is defined. We can only speculate that she might have first-person shooter video game skills. Therefore, with Carol's proven shooting ability thanks to the canon finale of Season 2, I have Carol winning immunity here. And who gets voted out? Well, I think Rhea and Rosa stay loyal to each other and vote for Ali, since she's the only camper eligible for elimination other than themselves. However, I think Carol takes the opportunity to side with Ali and persuades her to join her in voting for Rosa Maria. It makes sense for Carol to make this move against Rosa Maria so that Rhea loses one of her closest support systems, forcing her to be more reliant on Carol. Additionally, even though Ali did win an individual immunity challenge in this timeline, it might have been overshadowed by Hunter's performance in the same challenge. So, Rosa's performance in the episode 9 challenge might make Carol view her as a bigger physical threat than Ali, especially considering how Rosa Maria literally passed Carol en route to winning part 2 of that challenge. Therefore, the vote is a 2-2 tie, forcing Rosa Maria and Ali into a tiebreaker. Honestly, this is a really even matchup, and I think the winner of this challenge is entirely dependent on the type of challenge that they face. If the challenge is mostly physical, I think Rosa wins. But if the challenge is mostly mental, then I think Ali wins. I do think that Ali might have a slight edge considering her physical abilities in DC All-Stars, but I'm going to do something different. If Ali does win the tiebreaker, then the final 3 campers are Carol, Rhea, and Ali, which is the same final 3 as in the What If Maggie Won Rock Paper Scissors video that I posted a few weeks ago. Since we already know the outcome of that finale, let's try something different and say that Rosa Maria wins this tiebreaker, which is realistically possible. This eliminates Ali from the game and allows Rosa Maria to join Rhea and Carol in the finale. But hey, at least Ali gets to reunite with Hunter and Tess a night earlier, so I guess that's good. Now we're at the finale. Before we get to the challenge, we need to figure out who each eliminated camper supports. For Rhea, I think her only supporter is Connor, since the two of them were really close before Connor quit. For Carol, I think she gets Yul, Ali, Hunter, and Tessa's support. To be honest, Yul is in a very funny position because I'm pretty sure he doesn't like any of the finalists. But I do think he would view Carol as the most tolerable, considering how Rhea switched him onto the orange team and his horrible comments towards Rosa Maria. As for the other 3, since Carol tried to save Ali back in episode 11 by forcing a tie, I think that's enough to get Ali to support her. And if Ali supports her, then Hunter and Tess would probably follow her lead and support her too, considering how neither of them were particularly close with Rosa or Rhea. This means that Rosa Maria gets support from Maggie, Lake, Kai, James, and Aiden. Maggie and Lake were obvious considering that the 3 of them had an alliance earlier on in the game. As for Kai, he did have some good interactions with Rosa Maria early on in the season, so I think it makes sense for him to support her. As for James and Aiden, I'm not 100% sold on them siding with Rosa Maria, but I think it's justifiable. I definitely don't think they side with Carol considering that Carol tried to vote both of them out. But at the same time, I don't think either of them were close to Rhea or Rosa Maria by this point. In the end, I had them support Rosa because she started out on the same team as them, so they probably saw a lot of her personality and realized that she was a good-hearted person. Now the finalists each get to pick an eliminated camper to help them. Rhea picks Connor since he's her only supporter. Carol probably picks Hunter since he was seen as a very physical competitor. And I think Rosa Maria picks Lake since she also did well in challenges before her elimination. Now let's break down part 1 of the challenge. In canon, Rhea and Connor were able to complete this portion of the challenge pretty quickly, so it's reasonable to believe that they would be able to pull off a similar performance. As for Rosa and Lake, there's no evidence to suggest that Rosa is terrible at balancing, as opposed to someone like James. So if we assume that Rosa is just as good as Rhea at balancing, then Rosa should finish this section before Rhea. This is because in canon, Lake was Aiden's driver in this challenge and she managed to pass Rhea and Connor on their way to the end of this section. Therefore, since Lake is Rosa's driver, Lake should be able to pull ahead of Rhea heading into the next section. And for Carol, I don't think she would be bad at balancing, considering that in episode 9, she was able to stand on her sled while going downhill and still maintaining her balance. However, I'm not convinced that Hunter would be anything more than decent at driving a snowmobile. He did drive a boat back in episode 1, but a boat and a snowmobile are two different vehicles. So, I'm going to assume that he's just average at driving a snowmobile, causing them to move slower than the others. So heading into the second section, we have Rosa and Lake in the lead, followed by Rhea and Connor, with Carol and Hunter bringing up the rear. The second section is the driving portion. And honestly, I don't think the order changes. In canon, both Lake and Rhea drove their cars, so I wouldn't expect that to change in this timeline. As for Carol and Hunter, I feel like Carol would demand to drive. It just seems like something she would do. In the canon challenge, Lake and Rhea were both aggressive, and throughout the season, Carol could be described as having an aggressive personality. Therefore, if all three drivers are being aggressive, I think it's reasonable to say that all three of them will be driving faster than they usually would. And if they're all making the same increase in speed, then no one should be able to pass each other. So the order shouldn't change heading into the climbing section. Rosa and Lake are still in first, Rhea and Connor are still in second, with Carol and Hunter in last. Now for the climbing portion. For Rosa, I don't think there's a significant difference in size between her and Aiden, so since Lake was canonically able to get Aiden to the top of the cliff in first place, I think she should be able to do the same for Rosa. Additionally, Aiden could have saved time in canon if he didn't stop to have a conversation with Lake about James. So since Rosa doesn't really have anything paramount to talk about with Lake, Rosa should be able to get to the top of the cliffs even faster than Aiden did. For Rhea and Connor, they canonically maintained their second place position in this section even though they stopped to have a brief argument over Rhea's villainous actions. But since Rhea is less villainous in this timeline, they probably wouldn't have an argument, which means that Rhea will probably be able to make it to the top of the cliff in less time than it took her in canon. However, she still wouldn't be able to pass Rosa since Rosa is also traveling faster than Aiden did in canon. As for Carol, there's no evidence to prove that Carol would be good at climbing, just like Rosa. Therefore, if we assume that Rosa and Carol can climb at the same pace, Carol's speed relative to Rosa will depend on how well Hunter can support Carol's weight. Well, in a previous What If video I made about what would have happened if Maggie won rock paper scissors, I stated that Hunter would be able to pull Ali up the mountain with enough speed to help her catch up to Rhea and Connor. It was also pointed out in canon that Ali probably weighs half of Hunter's weight, meaning that Ali is really light. And if we're looking strictly at body proportions, I don't think it's completely outlandish to guess that Carol weighs more than Ali. Therefore, I think Hunter would have a more difficult time pulling Carol up the mountain than he would with Ali. So if we're maintaining consistency with my previous videos, then I think it's safe to say that Carol wouldn't be able to catch up to Rhea in this section, meaning that Rosa would finish this section first, with Rhea in second place, and Carol in third. For the cliff portion, it basically comes down to who can get dressed in their wingsuit and jump off the cliff first. The only evidence that I can find of any of the final three campers being afraid of heights was in episode 11, when Rhea hesitated before jumping off the cliff. And even then, Rhea got over it pretty quickly. And in canon, Rhea didn't seem to have any qualms about jumping off this cliff, so I don't think Rhea would have any significant trouble. And the same is true for Rosa and Carol. Therefore, if none of them are slowed down from the fear of jumping off the cliff, then they should jump off the cliff in the order that they arrive at the top of the cliff. This means that Rosa and Rhea would jump off the cliff and reach the docks first, eliminating Carol in third place. Sorry Carol. I guess third place is as good as it will get for you in this universe. Before we move forward, I want to establish one thing. Even though Rosa reached the top of the cliff before Rhea, for the rest of this scenario, I'm going to assume that Rosa waits for Rhea to put on her wingsuit and they glide down to the docks together. Why am I making this assumption? Well, I think it's sort of realistic. Rosa and Rhea's friendship is unbreakable by this point, and even though Rosa might not hate Carol, I think that Rosa would much rather have Rhea compete against her in the second half of the challenge. That way, either her or her closest friend will win the grand prize, rather than someone with an abrasive personality. And there's also another reason I'm making this assumption, and I'll explain it later. But nonetheless, I will make the assumption that Rosa and Rhea will be tied heading into the next section of the challenge. Next is the boat driving challenge. In canon, Rhea drove really quickly, so I expect her to do the same here. As for Rosa, she still has Lake by her side, and since Lake mentioned in episode 1 that she has boat driving experience, I think she would be more willing to move faster to keep up with Rhea. Therefore, I think Rhea and Rosa both make it to the platform at the same time. Now we're at the diving section. There's no evidence to suggest that Rosa is uncomfortable with diving or bad at finding things, so we'll assume that her performance in this section is just average. But for Rhea, there are multiple scenes from episode 13 of season 2 and episode 3 of season 3 that show Rhea being uncomfortable with scuba diving, which means she'll probably slow down during this section. I know that Connor is still with her in this timeline, but I don't think he'll be able to calm her down, especially since he couldn't even do that when they were both scuba diving in episode 3 of All Stars. So with this setback in place, I think Rosa makes it to the final section of the challenge with a decent lead over Rhea. The final part of the challenge requires the finalists to race a motorcycle around some obstacles while one supporter from each team shoots golf balls at them. For Rosa, she has 4 eligible supporters since Lake is busy driving her back to the beach. I don't see Maggie or Kai wanting to shoot a gun, so they're out. And in the end, I think I'm going to have James shoot the gun, only because in this timeline, Aiden was eliminated really early, so he didn't get to have any major interactions with Rosa unlike in canon. Meanwhile, James had many episodes during the merge to interact with Rosa, so maybe at some point during the early merge they had a deep conversation like they did in the canon finale. Maybe during these conversations James realizes how much Rosa needs the money to help her and her daughter, prompting him to help her in this challenge. Now for Rhea, this seemed a bit troublesome at first. As I established earlier, Connor was Rhea's only supporter. But since he's with her as she drives to the beach, there's no one left in Rhea's support circle to shoot golf balls. But then I realized, wait. Since Carol is eliminated, Carol and all of her supporters now have to choose someone else to support. And honestly, I think they all support Rhea. Carol tried to take Rhea under her wing, so she must like her to some degree. And the Poly Trio all started on the same team as Rhea, and that was the reason why Ali and Tess supported her in the canon finale, so I think it makes sense for them to do the same here. But what about Yul? Honestly, I think he refuses to support anyone, considering that the 2 remaining finalists are probably the 2 people he hates the most. Let's just say he walks out of camp and gets lost in the woods. But back to the topic. Who steps up to shoot the gun for Rhea? Truthfully, I think Ali does it. I'm really leaning into the idea that Ali regrets not socializing more with Rhea, which they established back in episode 11. Therefore, Ali stepping up to help Rhea could be Ali's way of saying, hey, I'm sorry we didn't talk more. Let me make it up to you by trying to help you win. Therefore, we have Ali and James shooting golf balls while Rosa and Rhea attempt to ride motorbikes to the finish line. Canonically, Rhea was able to ride the motorbike pretty well, but she only caught up to James because he crashed into an obstacle while looking behind him. Since Rosa is a more cautious individual, evidenced by her concern for James's speed when he drove her around in episode 12, I don't think that Rosa would crash. She might not drive as fast as James, but she should be able to stay in the lead for a large portion of this section. Therefore, it comes down to James and Ali's shooting abilities. James's shooting abilities aren't clearly defined, since we don't know if he shot one of Hunter's balloons back in episode 10, and he didn't compete in the slingshot challenge back in episode 11 either. And for Ali, most of my assessment of her shooting abilities have been speculation, so there's no guarantee that she's accurate. Not to mention that even if Ali is accurate with a handgun, that doesn't guarantee that she would be accurate with a Gatling gun, which is what she would have to use in this scenario. Therefore, since there's no solid proof that James or Ali would be able to hit Rosa and Rhea with a Gatling gun from a large distance, I'm going to assume that as is, the golf balls do not significantly hinder the 2 finalists, causing Rosa to maintain her lead over Rhea in the final section. But there's one more factor to consider. In the canon finale, Aiden told Lake to hit the Gatling gun, causing it to shoot multiple golf balls at a time, ultimately causing Rhea to fall off her motorbike and allowing James to cross the finish line first. The question is, since Aiden is supporting Rosa Maria in this timeline, does Aiden tell James to do the same? I actually don't think he does this. In canon, Aiden had very good reasons to tell Lake to hit the gun. And that's because he really loved James and he really didn't want Rhea to win since she left him hanging off a cliff. But in this scenario, I don't think Aiden has a strong desire to see either camper win or lose. In this timeline, Aiden never talked to Rhea since they were never on the same team, and even though he's supporting Rosa Maria, he never had a prolonged conversation with her in this timeline, so he's not supporting her with the same amount of passion as he had with James in the canon finale. Therefore, I don't think there's a pressing reason for Aiden to tell anyone to hit the Gatling gun. Thus, the guns remain as is, and the 2 finalists remain unfazed by the golf balls being shot at them. And because of this, it means that Rosa Maria is able to maintain her lead over Rhea, allowing her to cross the finish line first and claim the $1 million prize for her and her daughter. So we have our answer. If Yul successfully poisons Aiden in episode 5 of season 2, James starts his redemption arc much earlier, Yul gets betrayed by James shortly after, Rosa successfully plays her totem to break up the Poly Trio, and Rosa comfortably beats Rhea to win the $1 million prize. And keep in mind, this victory assumes that Rosa let Rhea catch up to her before beginning the boat section of the challenge. If Rosa jumped off the cliff alone and maintained her original lead over Rhea, then Rosa would have won by a wider margin. So going back to what I said earlier about why I assumed that Rosa would wait for Rhea before gliding down to the docks, I made this assumption to show that even if Rosa intentionally gave herself a setback, she would still walk away as the winner of the season. This leaves no doubt that in this timeline, Rosa Maria is the true winner of Disventure Camp Season 2, which I'm sure makes her and her daughter very happy. But something that I find interesting in this timeline is the effect that this would have on the future. If James plays his part in poisoning Aiden, do James and Aiden end up dating? I don't think so. If Carol makes it all the way to the final 3, does Carol get included in All Stars? I guess it's possible. And most importantly, if Rosa Maria ends up winning the season, does she get included in All-Stars? I understand why Rosa wasn't included in All-Stars, but it would feel weird to have an All-Star season without the winner of Season 2, but that's just my opinion. And that about does it for this video. What do you think of my theory? Do you agree with my thought process? Do you disagree? Did I miss something big that would impact the entire video? Either way, please let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like the video, click subscribe if you really like the video, and for some ending words of wisdom. Life isn't an anime. You are not the main character. And I cannot stress this enough. Just because someone tries to be nice to you, it does not mean that they are in love with you. Thank you, and farewell.